welcome back to Road to Doing Business session. This is our fourth session, and we are almost over for this cycle. We still have another session to finish today, but about this one, as you know, these sessions are taking place as part of an initiative called Doing Business, where Scale Up Porto, the initiative that promotes the entrepreneurship ecosystem in the city of Porto by the municipality, connects startups, scale-ups, and bigger organizations, more mature organizations. This fifth edition is being organized with the collaboration of Upotech, and we have been doing these training sessions before the meetings take place between the bigger organizations and the startups, so we can all be on the same page when the meetings take place. Today, we will be speaking about the relationship between the bigger organizations and the startups, and how to improve these collaboration, how to make it more productive. And to have this discussion, we have today two people that have been developing this relationship and making the bridge between the organizations and the startups, and trying to make both sides speak the same language, which is a big challenge for them as well. So we have Sonia Moosburger, who's a managing director at MEDIAMARKTSATURN Next, a program to make this connection. And we have also Rafael Pis, who is the manager of the IT labs at Sonai MC, and also promotes this kind of collaboration between the city of Porto and startups as well. So you are all muted as usual. If you have any questions, please put them on your chat. We will try to make this as collaborative as possible. And so that you know, the session is being recorded and will be published after. So you can also consult it after this session finishes. With no further delay, I will pass to Sonia. So Sonia, you can share with us a few tips, a few case studies, and help us understand how you collaborate with startups.
Thank you. Sure, I will. And I'm already apologizing for any background noise you might hear on my side, but I'm not the only one in the home office right now. So, but I hope it's going to be fine for you. So I would like to talk a bit about our experience from MEDIAMARKTSATURN, working with startups, and especially the cooperation between startups and a larger corporate like MEDIAMARKTSATURN, how that works, and what works good, and where might be some challenges. So for whatever reason, my cursor, now it works. Okay, sorry. So first of all, usually it's quite exciting if you're gonna start to work with corporates, especially for the startups, to get a foot into the door. But sometimes it can also drive you nuts because it's a completely different world, and that is not always only from the startup side, also from the corporate side. Working with startups, it's just something completely different that they are usually not used to. With MEDIAMARKTSATURN Next, which is a subsidiary of the MEDIAMARKTSATURN Retail Group, our focus is on experimentation. So experimenting and trying to find out as fast as possible how things work, and things are in this context innovation, new technologies, or related use cases. Then to understand if these use cases, technologies, and so on are actually relevant for our customers as well as for our organization. And we want to find out what else we have to consider if we want to move forward with those use cases. So to actually make it happen on a big scale. This could be processes, infrastructure, hardware, software, whatever do we need, what comes with this topic. We are from a next organization. We have a very simple structure. We have a research department and we have a projects department, and they work very close together, but have separate tasks. The research department has a task to actually look outside, what is out there, which technologies are evolving, how, who's testing what, and where risks and chances for us as an organization, where should we step in. And when we actually say, okay, let's do a test, we want to try this out, then actually the project team comes on the plate, and their task is to make it happen. All the way through, from setting it up until evaluation, and if that's the case, also transferring it into the real real organization, if you want so. And in this context, the role of Next, besides this, what I just earlier said, understanding how things work, from a startup perspective, is actually making the bridge into the larger organization, and to make sure that, on the one hand, these two worlds are actually able to cooperate and talk to each other, and also to make sure that things keep moving. So, because in a corporation, everything sometimes is a bit slower, and then things start to fall asleep, and we ensure that this doesn't happen. To give you an idea on what kind of projects I'm talking about, this is just a slide showing a couple of projects we've done in the last months or years. These are things from robotics in-store, self-checkout topics, or in-store positioning, so which is about location-based information about products, customers, but also how the store looks like, augmented reality, virtual reality, voice, machines are an interesting topic, automation in general, and there are quite also a couple of automation topics within our organization that we're working on, but they just don't visualize that nice because it's more or less data. We have a workflow that we follow, whereas in detail, it always varies a lot depending on the topic. We have quite a large funnel how we get into touch with interesting companies. Usually this are startups. So we work with organizations like Retail Tech Hub or Porto Digital. We go on conferences. We get approached by startups directly via mail, via LinkedIn, whatever. Plus, sometimes we reach out to corporations because we have different search fields and focus areas where we want to progress, and where we want to get in touch and understand if there are test opportunities. Then the funnel goes down and we select a couple of startups that we're interested in working with. And if we then take the decision, let's move forward, then we actually start to setting up the pilot, which is from a setup perspective, very basic things. That it has an administrational part that we as a corporation have to make sure that we go through. For example, that we have covered IT security, that we have covered data privacy, these kind of things. But it's also in this time frame you define what is actually the use case, what do we want to learn, what are objectives, how do we measure the success of the test. All these kind of things happen in the setup phase. Plus any development work that has to take place. Then we go into live testing. On our side, this usually means live with customers, but could be also a tech test, where we just do a technology test, which is without customers. And the live phase has a fixed start and end date, and then we evaluate the test results, referring back to the KPIs that we have defined at the very beginning in the pilot setup phase. And depending on the evaluation and how we see the results of the tests, and we either push for a rollout and going further into the company. Sometimes we realize that we need a second step to explore something in addition or in more detail. And sometimes we also realize it was an interesting test, but it's not relevant or not just for us. Like any of these outcomes are possible, and we would communicate into organization whatever is the outcome, just to also make sure that we keep our own corporation always involved in the topics that we do. From a timing perspective, this gives you a rough overview on how long these kind of things take. So the pilot setup is actually here split up in setup and implementation. So just for this administrational part, for setting the KPIs, for doing the legal checks, NDAs, really also fixing the budget, this should not take longer than 6 weeks. So 4 to 6 weeks, I think, is already like is definitely doable. You can also do it in less. Implementation time is 12 weeks at the maximum. So actually the target on our side that I give to our project managers for the setup and implementation should not be longer than 3 months. Okay. The live phase is typically somewhere between 3 and 6 months. But we also have run tests that only are 2 weeks live, because that's enough to actually understand if it's relevant and if it works. So it really always depends a lot on what are you actually testing. And the evaluation of the test should take place in the 4 weeks afterwards. And the evaluation on our side takes into account the startup that we're working for, the department maybe in the organization. So we all come together and really evaluate. So what do we think about the test? What do we think about the results? And so on, and what are the next steps? So we try to really make it quite transparent for everybody, and that both sides learn, the startups as well as we do. I've been talking now a lot about pilots, tests, projects, rollout. But what is actually the difference? Because from my experience, that's something which can create some confusion on both sides, on corporate side, but there at some point they have very fast a common understanding of what they're talking about, but also from a startup perspective. Because for the startup, like when you remember the first slide, when you actually get into this door of a large corporation, for you it's like jackpot. I'm in there, and now we're gonna go into all countries. But that's usually not the first thing that you do. So this is just a short theory exercise or overview, and I don't want to go into detail now, as we don't have too much time. But I think for you on the startup side, it's really important to understand that there's a differentiation between a pilot or a test, a project, and the actual rollout. And it's important for you, and I think also it's a task that you have to do very early with this corporate that you're working with. What are we actually talking about? What is your understanding of what we're doing? Because then you manage your expectations as well, and you have a clear understanding what to expect from the corporate and what can come next, but what is not automatically like a default follow-up from what you do. So in short, pilot tests are usually there to find out, does it actually work? Is it relevant for us? Is that something where we consider and maybe want to spend time and money in the future on? So these are short things, should not take longer than 3 to 6 months. So if you do something for 12 months, it's probably not a test anymore. And it's really about testing and learning, and also learning on your side to understand your product. Does it really work? Where do we have to twitch and make it better? Projects can be very similar to tests, and sometimes you jump over this test phase and go directly into a project. Usually the corporation is then already quite sure that this is relevant and that's what I want to do. So the question about do we actually need that is not a question that much anymore. Projects are already aiming to be integrated into the existing IT landscape. So whereas compared to pilot tests, it's okay to be quick and dirty. Projects shouldn't be that quick and dirty anymore. Therefore, also the duration is a bit longer, usually. And if you're talking about rollout, then it's really something for a couple of years, a longer period that the company really wants to use your product, integrate your product in their IT landscape permanently. And usually you're also talking about a couple of countries, a rollout sequence, how you get there. And it has therefore also an international component and larger teams involved and so on. Going now to a couple of particularities on a corporate side that I think you should be aware of. And also from my perspective, where I think that you as startups have actually the possibility to thrill the corporates and convince them that you are definitely worth working with. Something which is very typical and hard to understand from a startup perspective is that corporates are just super large and very complex, which means that they are slower, that things take more time, and are also presumably easy stuff is not easy and takes a lot of decisions and cannot be done fast. So my recommendation for startups to actually get into the door fast and to get things done without a lot of delay in just setting up stuff is make your solution as easily connectable as possible. So ideally, it's just plug and play. Plus, you are modular and flexible. So you have different ways how you can integrate into a corporation or how a corporation can use your services. So you can work with any type of integration, also the quick and dirty stuff. Basically, could be Excel files that you download from an ASP server, which is fine for you. So make the life for the corporate easy, so they don't have to go through their complex systems or adapt. Then you have to be aware about velocity, meaning corporates don't have just this one topic on the table. And also the person you're talking to is busy with many other topics and projects at the same time. That has a consequence that there is not much time for creativeness in the corporation and to look for creative processes. Therefore, don't waste your time, but also don't waste the time of the corporates, and be on the point on what you're offering. So don't be too fuzzy or leave too much open points. So the corporate has to connect the dots itself. So just be very on point. What can you deliver? So they can decide if that's relevant for them or not. And in this context, also be very clear about your USP and the added value that you bring on a very practical basis. So for example, when you talk to corporate, pre-think how could a test look like? How could the corporate understand and find out very easy and fast if your solution actually solves a problem on their side? Don't ask them, what should I solve for you? Make a proposal, come prepared. And also don't be shy, so be a bit pushy, but don't overdo it. So try to find the right level. So don't call them every day, but when you have agreed to get an answer in a certain period of time, go and ask for it if you don't get it. So don't wait until they always reach out to you. That sounds a bit odd, resources. So as corporates are typically a lot larger than you are, you would assume that they have enough resources for everything. But like every organization, corporates lack resources every time, always. And therefore, and that goes back also to the first point that I just mentioned, try to put as little effort as possible on the corporate side, especially in this test period. And if a corporate doesn't have like an innovation unit like us who would take over the PMO role, do it by yourself and make sure that there's some project organization happening, and that you make sure that it just follows up and go through and help out there. Try to demand as little resources as possible, and also be prepared for privacy and cybersecurity topics, meaning have the stuff in place. These are mandatory topics every corporate will ask for in regards to data privacy, and in regards to IT security or cybersecurity. Have documents ready that the respective departments and the corporate can just go through, understand easily, and say, okay, fine, tick, you can go further. Budget. Like in any company, budgets are a sensitive topic, and corporates tend to have like a long-term budget planning. So there are usually no budgets around that are just there and you'll take them because nobody else takes them. So all the budgets departments have, they are long-term planned. And this is something you have to keep in mind, on the one hand for piloting, for testing, so actually to getting into a corporate, but also for the step going further into a project or into a rollout, from different perspectives. From a testing perspective, you need to have your plan. What is my pricing for a test? And don't necessarily apply for a test pricing the same pricing that you would apply for a regular or for a rollout or for a project, because you're aiming on getting the foot into the door and you don't want the hurdle to be too high, so too many people in the organization have to approve to actually do that test with the purpose to find out if it's relevant. And on the other hand, looking into the other types like pilot, like project and rollout, if you're talking about a rollout and bigger money is involved in that, corporates need to plan that on time. It needs to flow into a certain budget process. Therefore, I think it is important for you to, if the idea is to actually go into rollout, to also understand what are the workflows on corporate side, how do they actually get, and how fast, especially, do they get the budget approved for going into a rollout scenario. Commitment, one more point. So corporates can get easily excited about new stuff and exciting things that especially startups usually bring into corporates, but they can also lose interest quite fast due to various things, because there's a lot more on their plate, because things are not moving fast enough, results are not seen as fast as they have thought they would see. So my advice would be stop pitching and start listening. So really understand what your counterpart wants to achieve and how you can actually help this person to achieve the objectives. Then generate commitment, a joint commitment by defining KPIs, success criteria, how to measure the pilot and the test. Because that also forces the corporate into a situation to think about, okay, what is actually a success? When am I satisfied with this pilot? And there's not a gut decision, a gut feeling why we should continue or not. Don't overpromise and underdeliver, because that just creates disappointment. And really spend time to understand if your solution really solves a critical issue for the corporation and not just a nice to have thing, because nice to have has less likelihood on being really relevant and then going the next steps in the process. I'm not going to run through this chart because it just puts all of that, what I've just said, on one slide for the ones who like to read it more comprehensive. And basically, that's already it. And I'm done. So thank you for listening.
Great, Sonia. No, you're not done. You know why? Because we have a few questions here for you before we pass on to Rafael, so we can also give his feedback. We have here a lot of questions, and let me start here from one that's about free pilots. What's your opinion regarding free pilots? Because Mario here says that a corporate budget is defined yearly, and most times startups can't wait that long to well to prepare themselves. So how do you deal with free pilots?
We also do partly free pilots, and I think it's fair to do so. It always depends a bit also what is the objective of the startup and which phase are you in. So especially for startups at an early phase, free pilots also give them the opportunity to really understand, is my product or solution working in the way I intend it to be, or where do I still have issues? What is missing? So I think that's a good opportunity to find out in real life. And I also think from a startup perspective, it's always fair also to say, listen, I want to get a foot into the door. I want to do that as fast as possible. And therefore, I also do free pilots. But I also think that you should be fair to yourself and also be very clear on how far do I go. So I think it's important to define from your startup perspective, what is my test setup? So have a package. You have a test package, and it's very clear defined, like how long is the test, what is included, what is not included, how much does it cost, or is it for free? Or maybe I have even two packages. I have a free version, and that only goes, for example, for 2 weeks. It's about understanding your product, your solution. So it's be clear by yourself, because if you know how much you think you're worth and what you're aiming for, you actually go there with a proposal, and it makes a better impression. Also on my side, having the impression that my counterpart has thought it through and has a clear view on what he thinks. And if the startup, for example, comes over and says, well, I'm running a test, and we can run a test, and the test costs you, I don't know, 50,000 euros. And I think, no, that's way too much. I would love to do the test, but I cannot afford that. Or I think it's too much. I will tell them. Or sometimes, yeah. So I think, and 50,000, I think is quite on the high end of doing a test. But I think pre-tests are fine, but you need to be also aware. So what is my objective? What do I want to get out of it? And have a clear offering and package for that.
We'll now keep and save the other questions, and we have many here for to the end of the session. But meanwhile, I will pass to Rafael, so Rafael can share his overview and his tips on this collaboration between startups and corporates. And write your questions. Keep writing your questions on the chat so we can save them for later.
Sure.
Rafael,
thank you, Danielle. Before jumping to my part, I will also answer this question, and I'll try to be objective. So I have nothing against free pilots, exactly like I have nothing against paid pilots. It depends on what are the goals and what we are trying to achieve. If it's startup, it's still learning. It's on their very early days, and with that trial, they are learning with us, and we are learning with them. It's a win-win scenario where we are both learning. So it's okay for us to be doing a free pilot because we are paying with knowledge and expertise from our side as well, and that's fine. If we are talking about a startup that is a little bit more mature, they can already deliver value. It's a matter of understanding if the conditions are in place for us to pay what they consider the minimum amount for a pilot to run. So both things are fine. It depends on the scenario and what are the conditions. It was great to have Sonia's introduction because we had a clear example of a corporate on how do they handle these kind of processes, how the funnel works. I took a different approach, not a better one, it's just a different approach. So I took a more generic path from the experience I have on some quick tips that you can think about whenever interacting with corporates in the future. Allow me just a second to share my screen so I can keep the pace without getting lost. So here we go. So first of all, and it's in line with the answer I was giving to the previous question. There's no recipe. It's not always free. It's not always paid. You will always have to do some discovery on the company you will be working with. And that's because every company has its own structure, has its own entry points, and you will always have different ways to interact with these companies. You have big corporates, for example, Sun IMC includes a lot of the entry points that you can see here. We have interactions directly through the business units. We have a dedicated innovation team. We have the tech labs represented by the IT labs that I run. We have hackathons. We also have the corporate venture capital firm. So there are many ways you have to interact with us. And the best approach depends on which stage you are and what you are looking for. If you are a very early stage startup, you developed an algorithm with your PhD program, for example, and you would like to try it. If there's an hackathon run by the company where your algorithm might fit one of the problems that you are solving on that hackathon, it might be a great way for you to have stage time where you can showcase your algorithm, the potential of your algorithm, and it's a good way for you to get visibility, sometimes to C-level, because these corporate hackathons usually have C-level people on the jury, so it might be a good way. If you are a little bit more mature and you already have a minimum viable product that can be piloted integrated or not with the solutions of the company, you can choose other entry points, like for example the IT labs, the tech lab that I mentioned here, or even the innovation team. You might be wondering what's the main difference between the innovation team and the tech labs. Once again, it depends on the corporate, but specifically in our case, we have the innovation team that has an innovation scope way broader than just tech innovation. So they handle way more projects, financed projects, projects that are not at all related with technology, but mainly focused on process improvement, for example. And they have a bigger scope, as I mentioned. If you have a more pure tech solution, the tech labs can be a good entry point. So this is just to give you an idea that there are many options and you always need to evaluate it to better understand which one better fits your current stage. Also very clear things that you need to set from the very beginning when you start conversations. It's to understand both side goals, because they might not be compatible. If a startup it's mainly looking, for example, to a sale, if on the other hand the corporate is still in a stage where they need to learn about that specific technology, that's not compatible, so it's not going to work. You need to realign the goals, and there are many different goals that either corporates or startups can have. And once again, it depends on their maturity level. As a corporate, and on my case at the IT Lab, sometimes we are just trying to learn something about a new technology that just came out. Let's say blockchain came out a couple years ago, and we were into blockchain mainly because we wanted to understand the potential of it. We were not aiming at adopting something right away. Some other times we just want to fix a problem that we actually have, or we want to improve a process that we have that it's not performing as we like. So those are different goals or objectives that we may have when we interact with a startup. On the startup side, you can also have different goals, because you are not ready to sell right from the very beginning. Sometimes you also want to learn more about the industry. You also want to build a case study that you can use as a leverage for a potential sale with the next company you interact with. So take this in consideration. This is also very important. Whenever I work with startups that from the very beginning they already have a clear vision of what the collaboration can be, this makes the process way faster, because there's already a plan, there's a timeline, there are minimum conditions. I have everything that I need to take a faster decision and be able to already set the right expectations with the startup. If they are aiming too high, as Sonia was saying, too expensive, I can already set from the very beginning, this is too expensive. If you save 2 or 3 meetings later to announce the number, you will be losing that time on the overall process. So if you come prepared with already a suggestion of an approach, and that approach already has typical timelines and minimum conditions, makes everything faster. And of course, don't be too strict to that proposal, because as I said in the beginning, each company has its own format and is used to its own processes. So you also need to be flexible on that systematic approach. This is something that Sonia already mentioned, and it's never too much to say it again. Be clear about what you can and cannot do, because it's not uncommon for us to see big promises and big visions on PowerPoint, but when we start trying the solution, the results are just not there. This takes all your credibility down, breaks all the expectations that you created with the corporate, and closes abruptly the relationship. This is a good tip for you to, whenever possible, to try to get face time with business units. And when you get face time with business units, try to make that time in your favor by allowing them to speak rather than pitching, because these are the guys that will tell you all the pains they have on their businesses, on their processes, and then you can better adapt all your communication and even your process to the actual needs that they have on their businesses. So this look like common sense, but sometimes it's not, again, when common to see startups pitching more than listening, and listening is very important here. This is a somewhat controversial topic. This is a recommendation. Always try to have beforehand commitments with KPIs. And Sonia also mentioned it's important to set KPIs on what is considered success after a pilot or a proof of concept. But sometimes that's not always possible. And that also depends on the goal and on the steps you need to take within the corporate to make proof that your technology and your solution is worth it. Because as you probably know, you have different decision gates within the corporate. And sometimes for you to reach the ultimate decision gate, you already need to bring in some results. And for us to get those results, we need to pilot something without a specific commitment of adoption, because you need to have those results to go to the final decision gate. So when I say here commitment with KPI, I mean adoption commitment. And because the more mature startups, it's common for them to show the pilot conditions attached to a commitment of adoption if we reach a specific KPI. Unfortunately, sometimes we cannot do it because we need to take those results to a higher level of decision, and we only get it if we run the pilot. So sometimes we need to do this in many stages. Just keep that in mind. Timing, it's also key here. It's important for you to try to ask and to get the answer as early as possible on what are the current priorities for the corporate, because if you are coming into the door with a new opportunity, but that opportunity won't be a priority for the current year, you will probably be dragged with interest for a lot of time without an actual will to commit in the short term. Companies set their yearly goals, companies set their yearly profiles, so try to understand them so you can better fit. And this can help you pick the right companies for you to be working with, because I understand that you as a startup have a limited capacity. That limited capacity will allow you to do X number of pilots per year. So make sure you pick the ones that will consider you as a priority, not the ones that just think it's interesting, but not for now. And it's important for you to understand that. The decision making, and this is complementary to what I was saying before. You might have many levels of decisions, so it's important for you to know how the decision making is made within the corporate, but also the budget availability. And depending on those layers and the autonomy each one of those decision making layers have, things can run differently. I can give you our example. At the IT Labs, we have an annual budget committed to POCs, and up to a specific threshold, we don't need to get approval from anyone else. We can take that decision directly if we see the interest, if we see the value. Up until a specific threshold, we say, okay, let's do it. We have the money available. Let's start next week. And for other things that might be a little bit more costly, we need to raise the opportunity to a different level, and that will take a whole different decision-making process, and it will take way more time. Sometimes it might be worth it for you to maybe break the whole pilot into something smaller, try something smaller, for example, with the IT Labs first, and then with the results, flag the other decision-making level with a stronger value proposition, because you already know and you already integrated with part of our IT stack. And that was the quick tips I wanted to bring in to this discussion. I'm also looking forward to the questions, because I didn't want to spend too much time on this, because I wanted to make sure we had time to address your specific concerns on these kind of interactions.
Thank you, Rafael. And I will just pick on something that you said about spending time with the business units. You were saying that it's important to connect with the people that manage the business inside the corporates. But if you and Sonia and units like you are the ones that work as entry point, what's the best way to reach them? And that also connects to a question Kelvin has put here on the chat about what should be the approach. Is it the better approach? Is it bottom up? Is it from the C level down? What's the better approach to really reach the corporate and start working with it?
Sure. Well, regarding the entry point, something that you should be aware is don't try to go through all the doors at the same time, because people talk and people will know that you are trying different things. And if what you are communicating through the different doors, it's different, it's even worse. So be aware of it and make sure all your entry points on the corporate side are aware of all the other connections that you have open, so they can sync. Otherwise, you will have trust issues within the corporate. Again, the best entry point, as I mentioned in one of my topics, it depends on your stage, depends on the goal for you with that interaction. Can be the innovation unit, can be an hackathon, or can be a tech lab. Regarding the specific tip I gave for you to try to have FaceTime with business units, you will have to use us, the entry points, as a way for you to reach that. Because, and at least I speak for myself, my role within the company is to be a facilitator and to represent the startups within the corporate. And sometimes I'm thinking a lot on the benefits on the startup side and on the concerns the startup will have when compared to the ones of the corporate, because I know that if we do not take that in consideration, things will not work. And this win-win scenario needs to be there. So you need to try to request that FaceTime with the entry points that you have there that works as a facilitator. And it's way easier for you to develop a good relationship with these entry points because they understand your scenario. They will be more helpful, and they will try to keep you up to date on the current status when compared to the business units that they have other priorities, they have other focus, and probably the meeting request that you are sending them, it's not as a priority as the customers they need to serve. So try to use these entry points as a leverage for you to get that FaceTime.
Sonia, is there something that you'd like to add to this? Or
no, definitely not. I think Rafael has brought it to the point. So it's use the innovation units, and if you're actually progressing at some point, the innovation units will be out, because then you're actually talking to the business units only.
Another question, Sonia, that we have here is, how do you connect with the internal stakeholders? How do you navigate the organization together with the startup?
So basically, our team consists of people who have a very wide network into the organization. We have continuous exchange within the organization to actually understand what are current topics, where are challenges, and so on. And we try to engage as much as possible with our colleagues there. And when we see something interesting or are approached by startups with interesting solutions, we reach out to our colleagues and basically check with them first. Do you see that as a potential solution to solve an issue you have? Do you have time? And are you willing to actually run a test? And that's how we engage with our colleagues. If we realize that it's just not the right timing, like Rafael said, or there is no issue, we have other solutions in place, we also are very transparent in regards to that towards the startups. Sometimes we also run projects where we don't need a business unit because we do them by ourselves. So basically we are the ones who are trying to solve an issue or problem, because there is nobody yet in the organization who's taking care of that. Then I just need to talk with myself. It's easier. But that's how it basically works.
Yeah, let me allow me also to add something on it. There are two things we do whenever a startup reaches with a specific value proposition. In one hand, we try to understand if there's a fit on our IT infrastructure, because if there's no fit, it's not worth it to pursue it further. And if there's a fit, we go to the business side to understand if they are into it, if there's value in it, and if they are committed to pursue it. Because if they are not, I prefer to tell back to the startup that it's not going to be a priority in the next 6 months. Let's speak again in 6 months. There are also other things that I try to do within the IT landscape, which is if we have a brand new tool for a specific problem and we had just adopted one 6 months, 1 year ago, a new one, it's not worth it to pursue this one, because in the upcoming 3 to 4 years, we won't be changing any of these tools because we just did the investment. I also try to manage those expectations with the startup, so they have the clear understanding of what's possible and what's not possible and what's the time frame, at least with us.
Yeah, so it's all about timing. If it's not the right time for whatever reason, it doesn't make sense. And commitment. So if we have the feeling that the department is not committed, then you should never convince somebody who doesn't believe in things in the first place, especially when it's about finding things out, testing, experimenting. You won't get anywhere.
About that decision-making tree and the process inside each one of your organizations, we are here getting ready for the meetings that we'll all be having, and both of you will be having meetings with startups as part of doing business. Should these startups ask you and the other organization what's the decision-making process they will have to go through after these meetings? So should they try to learn from you during the meetings what they should be expecting afterwards?
From our side, it's usually quite easy. So from a test, and that's a bit circling back also to the costs, if a test is easy to be set up, there is usually no big decision trees required. And easy means from a finance perspective, as a corporate, I don't have to run through any boards or something and get like from the big guys approval. And the other part is it's not complicated to integrate in the IT landscape. So if that's something which is really easy to just set up and give it a try, then there are usually no big decision trees and circles required, just the interest. Yes, that's something that we really would like to test and find out, and that's interesting for us, or we think it's relevant for us. That's usually the only thing to be checked then. And on our side, that's then usually if that's something where we need input and feedback from the department, we have to go back once or twice and then can give feedback to the startup.
Okay. On our side, of course, it depends on the approach, as I mentioned. If it's something we can handle directly with the IT labs, it's a flat decision rate. Myself, I take the decision. As I mentioned, we have an annual budget, and by the way, we never spent the whole budget we had for the year. So it's never a matter of money to be able to do it. It's a matter of having the right opportunities, the right technologies in sync with the commitments and priorities we have at the time. So that doesn't mean that if someone comes to me and say, I have this to do for free, that doesn't mean that we will do it just because it's for free. The first thing we do is, if we need the help from someone else on the business side or on the IT side, I first need to get their commitment. And if they are interested and willing to put the time on it to make it happen, that's one of the things I need to check on the checklist. If that's there, then regarding the budget, I take the decision myself and I go to the money that it's reserved for it. So it's usually not a financial issue. Of course, if it's a big amount, there are other things that we need to do. So it always depends. If it's a big amount, I cannot take the decision myself. Even if it's within my budget, I have a threshold. But if it's a big amount, we need to go ask for the IT directors. And if it's within the IT directors' scope, we can take the decision together with the IT directors. Once again, if it's in sync with the commitment and the priorities for that year. If it's an even bigger amount, we need to go to the administration boards to approve such a thing. But if we need to go to that third level of approval, it's something that can take a year.
Another question that we have here on the chat is about the challenges that you can tell right away of working with startups. What are the main challenges? And I would say just pick two so we can be fast. Each one of you, you can pick the two biggest challenges when you're working with startups. And for you specifically, Sonia, is this the first time you will be connecting and working with Portuguese startups? So who starts?
Well, I'll start then. Biggest challenges. Most of the time they are not prepared for the first interaction. They do not have all the answers, and they do not know enough our business. So preparation is key. Of course, that I cannot generalize. We have good and bad startups everywhere. But I tend to find a lot of startups that lack preparation. That's one of them. The second one, it's the way how they manage expectations. We are a lot of times disappointed with what was promised when compared to what was delivered. So those are two.
Completely agree. Nothing to add. The second question, yes, we have worked with Portuguese startups and have been also in contact with Portuguese startups, but not with too many. So, but it happens. We don't limit, like we are not focused on any geographics or something. So that doesn't matter too much for us where the startups from. From our experience, most of the startups that we're working with are from Europe, and also a lot of them from Germany, which leads me to the hypothesis that it's for the startups, even so they're a little bit mature, it's just easier to work in their geographical regions, that they focus there. But in general, it doesn't matter for us where the startups are from.
You are muted, Daniela.
Rafael, I know that you've been working mostly with Portuguese startups, but you also work with international ones. So when a Portuguese startups reaches you, will you compare with other solutions in the market, or will you stick to this solution? And well, how broad is your research when you receive a proposal from a Portuguese startup?
Sure. Well, we have no preference, and we actually work with startups from all over the world. So we have current things running from startups from Tel Aviv, from New York, from Portuguese companies. So it's quite broad. And I saw that on the question, someone asked if it's different working with Portuguese startups, and the truth is that there are good and bad startups everywhere. So I didn't notice nothing different on the Portuguese startups. You can find mature and then mature startups pretty much everywhere. So I wouldn't say that it's better or worse regarding the Portuguese ones. About the way how we analyze a startup, it depends on how they got in touch with us and what's the current goal. If it's something we really want to execute and we are the ones leading it, let's say I have this particular problem and I need to find something innovative to fix it, I do a very broad analysis on who's better positioned to fix this problem. If it's a problem that I'm not looking into, it's a new technology and someone reaches me saying, I have this technology, it might be interesting for your industry. They are not looking for a sale, they are looking for validation. I'm not going to be looking if there's someone better. If the conditions are fair, if they are mature enough for us to have good results, and if we have the time to do it, we commit with them right away. And here it's a matter of being faster than having the perfect solution.
About these current context, and Sonia, we were recently speaking about these, that the context that corporates and startups are facing nowadays is very different from 2 months ago. So priorities for the companies also changed, and maybe corporates are having a more pragmatic approach to these pilots, tests, and sales and everything. So do you want to elaborate a little bit on that?
Sure. So yeah, everything has changed a lot. I think not only from a corporate perspective, also for us as consumers, just human beings. And from a corporate perspective, I'm expecting that corporates in general, especially in retail, will on the one hand hold together their money with a bit more like seriousness, because it's a tough time, not only now but also in the coming months. Plus topics that have been like the focus within retail innovation, retail technology in the last 6 months are not that relevant right now anymore, and probably also with less priority in the upcoming months. So if you have spent time on retail in the last months, it was always a lot about experience and bringing the customer experience to the next level. An experience in the context that you want customers to enjoy their shopping trip and enjoy in the meaning of spend time, experience something new, spend as much time as possible in the store, try out things, being excited about seeing stuff, interacting with products, interacting with people, all these kind of things. And Corona actually brings us now into a complete different direction, because what we see is, and what we do ourselves is, when we go shopping, we are super targeted. We know before what we want. We are in there, we are out there. We don't want to touch anything. Ideally, we don't want to have contact. We need to wear masks. So the experience, it's still about experience. And I would also underline that it's make the experience as enjoyable as possible. But enjoyable in the current context means give security to customers, that it's safe to come into our stores, that we have put all safety and hygiene restrictions in place, that we found comfortable solutions, to also be consulted, but also just get your things you're looking for and get out if you want to. And that means that topics, for example, before, if you talked about new and exciting stuff that's coming up, you were talking, for example, about augmented reality in the store. Now in the next months, I think topics like appointment booking will be relevant. Digital information without touching stuff. For example, just, is it okay to go into the store or not? Like, is it overcrowded already? So transparency on consumer side, contactless things will get even more attention. So it's also about experience, but from a different perspective. Plus, I think there will be, or not I think, there will be for sure a stronger push on e-commerce and the interlinkage between e-commerce and brick and mortar, because the acceleration of online is just now going on due to Corona.
Yeah, do you want to?
Yeah. It's unavoidable. Things changes, and there's nothing. It's impossible to be doing the same things during this period. In our case, we had to postpone or hold some of the in-store experiences we had planned, because the priority on our stores was security, and they had to adapt. They had to change a lot of things very fast. So the last thing they wanted to hear, it's another distraction. That's not a priority for this current time. So that definitely happened, and it inevitably has an impact on the startups we are working with to run those experiences. On the other hand, we are using this extra time that we have to review priorities and to extra feed the pipeline. We look into a lot of things throughout the year. We prioritize them. And the prioritization has different parameters. It can be how easy it is to run the proof of concept or pilot, or how critical it is for our business. So we are taking this extra time we have, taking consideration the things we had on hold, to extra feed the pipeline, and also look for things that we can run remotely, because taking consideration the limitations that we have to move things around, to be in places doing things, we are also feeding the pipeline with extra experimentations that can be run remotely. So there's an opportunity for this kind of startups that have such solutions.
So we are speaking about two retailer companies, but this should be applicable to a whole other group of industries in terms of priorities. Any trends that you identify for your industry specifically?
Well, Sonia already mentioned something, some of them, the experience in store, touchless interfaces, extra information for the customer so they can take better decisions. But if we look into e-commerce, definitely there was a big increase in demand. A lot of the retailers struggled even with their IT infrastructure because they were not ready for such a sudden rush to the store. So some of them even struggled technically. So there have been some improvements, but on the logistical side as well. There was a big struggle to be able to deliver all the demand we had. So innovative partnerships, innovative solutions to deliver new requests, and also a lot of focus on automation. If we would look into automation on the delivery process, we would look into maybe 2 years' time, something we would start doing. It became a priority right away with this rush. So for e-commerce, this ends up having a positive impact, because our e-commerce will definitely be more mature, because e-commerce in Portugal is not as developed as in the UK, for example, and this brought a big push. So now e-commerce companies have that opportunity to improve as well, and following the demand that is increasing.
So thank you so much, you both, for sharing all this information about your work, and also not only your work, but what you see as the ideal collaboration between more mature organizations and startups. Today we have to finish earlier. If we don't have any more questions, well, we will close this session. I hope this was useful information for you to get ready, not only for the doing business meetings, but to work with your clients. And we know that in our ecosystem, most of our startups are B2B startups, so they really have to understand how to work with other businesses, how to sell to other businesses. It was, well, we will have another session of the Road to Doing Business later on today at 5 p.m. about innovation strategy. We will have Rui Coutinho explaining how corporates and startups are adopting and developing innovation strategies worldwide, and exploring a little bit on the subject. So you're all invited to join us later on. Thank you all so much for coming. Sonia, Rafael, thank you. All the participants, and you, Patek, as well, for supporting us on this. And well, speak soon.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.